Shalom, y'all. Welcome back to Light of the Scroll. So, I'm Jennifer, and if you're new, welcome. Thank you for listening. If you're not new and you've listened to other episodes before, thank you for coming back. I appreciate you coming back and listening to what I've got to say. Or what Yah has to say, I should say. Because I do pray about these and I get confirmations, and so yeah, that's how that works. And then of course I have to take time to put it all out, and um, so that way I can have a smooth talk or moment with you all. Anyways, so we're going to talk about a supposed story written long ago that speaks directly into the world we're living in now. It's a pattern Yah preserved for us, because we are walking through it today. It's not just a history lesson. Today we're talking about Babylon. What happened there, what Yah's people lost there, how they were changed, and why the mirror of Babylon still matters for us today. When most people hear the word Babylon, they picture an ancient city with hanging gardens, towering walls, something dusty, far removed from modern life. But in scripture, if you think about it, Babylon's not only a city, it's a system, a culture, a way of thinking, a structure built on man's authority instead of Yah's authority. And once you understand Babylon as a system, you begin to see it appear again and again across history. The seed of Babylon is planted all the way back in Genesis. Genesis 11:4 tells us, "Then they said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth.'" Listen to that language. Let us build. Let us make a name. Let us define ourselves. This is humanity declaring independence from Yah. This is mankind deciding they no longer want to receive identity from their Creator. They want to construct identity themselves. They want to reach heaven on their terms. They want to be on their own authority. That is the heartbeat of Babylon. Self-rule over God rule. Self-definition over God definition. Human wisdom over divine instruction. So, what does Yah do? He confuses their language. He scatters them, and the tower falls. But the spirit behind it does not disappear. It travels through generations. It matures. It evolves. And eventually it takes physical form in one of the greatest empires of the world ever seen, Babylon. Now, to understand the weight of what happened when Babylon came against Jerusalem, we have to understand what Jerusalem meant to Yah's people. Jerusalem was not just a capital city. It was the place where Yah had his name. The temple was the center of covenant life. It was where atonement was made, where priests served daily, where incense rose morning and evening, where the lampstand burned continually, where the bread of the presence sat before Yahweh, where the feast gathered the tribes 3 times a year, where the Torah was read aloud, where children learned their identity, where families oriented their calendars, their worship, and their obedience. Covenant life was not just belief. It was an embodied rhythm, a time, a space, a practice, a community, a memory. Then came Babylon. In 2 Kings 25:8-9, on the 7th day of the 5th month, Nebuzaradan, the commander of the imperial guard, an official of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. He set fire to the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. Every important building he burned down. Imagine it. Flames climbing the cedar beams, gold melting and running down stone, priests fleeing, people crying, walls collapsing, smoke covering the city. It was not just political defeat, but spiritual displacement. Without the temple, there was no altar. Without the altar, no daily offerings. Without the offerings, no Day of Atonement services. Without the feast in Jerusalem, there was no national gathering before Yah. Their worship system, the structure Yah himself gave, was interrupted. And then the people were taken from the land and carried into Babylon, not as tourists, but as exiles, foreigners, captives, strangers in a system that did not honor their God. Psalm 137 captured the ache of their hearts. By the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. There on the poplars we hung our harps, for there our captors asked us for songs. How can we sing the song of the Lord when in a foreign land? It wasn't that they didn't know the song. They were so sad. How could they? How do we live covenant life when the world around us does not run on covenant principles? How do we remain Yah's people when everything around us pressures us to become something else? That is the question of exile. Babylon did not only remove them from Jerusalem, Babylon sought to reshape their identity. Daniel and his friends show us exactly how Babylon works. Daniel 1:5 says, the king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. That wasn't kindness. That was indoctrination. If you eat from the king's table, you become dependent on the king's provision. If you are trained in the king's literature, you begin to think like the king. If you are groomed for the king's service, your loyalty slowly shifts. Then, Daniel 1:7 tells us the chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar. To Hananiah, Shadrach. To Mishael, Meshach. And to Azariah, Abednego. Now, names in Hebrew usually have an identity or a calling. So Daniel means God is my judge. Hananiah means Yah is gracious. Mishael means who is like Yah. And Azariah means Yahweh has helped. Babylon replaced those names honoring their Babylonian gods. That's what Babylon does. It renames, reframes, re-educates, reprograms. Change the name, change the diet, change the language, change the worldview, and slowly identity shifts. But Daniel 1:8 tells us, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. That one sentence is the hinge of the entire exile story. Even in Babylon, Daniel knew who he was. Even in exile, obedience preserved identity. Even in a foreign system, covenant still mattered. Now here is something we must sit with for a moment. Not all Israelites resisted Babylon like Daniel. Many settled in. Many built houses. Many planted gardens. Many raised families. Many opened businesses. Many prospered. Babylon became familiar, comfortable, predictable. Yahweh even instructed them through Jeremiah to build houses and settle down, plant gardens and eat what they produce, marry and have sons and daughters. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you will too. They were to live in Babylon, but they were never to forget Jerusalem or who they were or who Yah was. But when the exile ended and Yah opened the door for return, many did not go back. Babylon had become home, and that is the quiet danger of exile. You can survive it, then adapt to it, then forget you were ever exiled at all. And this is where the mirror turns towards us. Because Babylon is not just ancient history. Babylon is any system that elevates man's ways above Yah's way. A culture that tells you truth is personal preference. A culture that tells you identity is self-created. A culture that reshapes morality to fit comfort. A culture that rebrands obedience as legalism. A culture that calls compromise love. A culture that trains children's thinking from the earliest age. A culture that feeds constant distraction, and a culture that normalizes spiritual numbness. Just like Babylon renamed Daniel, modern culture renames righteousness. Just like Babylon fed from the king's table, modern culture feeds endless entertainment, indulgence and noise. Just like Babylon trained minds for years, modern institutions disciple hearts through media, education, and ideology. And Yah's people today face the same exile question. How do we live covenant faith inside a system not built on covenant? The answer has not changed in 3,000 years. Resolve not to defile. Stay in the word. Walk in obedience. Guard identity. And remember Zion. Revelation 18:4 calls across the generations, come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins. Not a physical departure, but a refusal to assimilate. Because exile does not always look like chains. Sometimes exile looks like comfort. It looks like convenience or distraction, or like blending in so well that we forget we were ever meant to stand apart. Yet Yah has never abandoned his people in exile. He preserved faith in Babylon. He preserved the scriptures, the covenant memory. He raised up Daniel. He raised up Esther. He brought his people home, and he is still doing that today. So you're not forgotten. You're not abandoned. You are part of the story that Yah is still writing. Remember that Babylon is temporary. The kingdom is eternal. So as I close today, if this episode stirred something in you, take a moment and sit with it. Ask Yah to search your heart, to show you where you have grown comfortable in Babylon, where the world around you has shaped your thinking more than his word, where convenience has quietly replaced conviction. Because exile doesn't always come with chains. Sometimes it comes with comfort, distraction, slowly blending in with forgetting who we are. But just like Daniel, we are called to resolve in our hearts not to defile ourselves, to walk in obedience, to remember Zion, to live set apart, even while surrendered by a different system. You're not forgotten. You're not abandoned. Yah is still calling his people out of Babylon and back to covenant faithfulness. So stay in the word, keep walking in obedience, guard your identity, and remember, this world is not your home. The kingdom is coming. Remember, you can always go to my Etsy shop, Sanctified by Yahweh. Click the link below, and you can start out this walk the way Yah intended it to be. We want to be set apart. We don't want to be blended in. We don't want to sit in the background. Shalom, y'all. See you next time.